Whoa. It's saying it's not. All right, here we go. I'm going to read through Genesis chapter 40. I've been reading through the book of Genesis periodically. I want to get through it, and at some point, Lord willing, maybe we can go through the first 5 chapters of Genesis and study through it. At some point in time, I look over to this side because I have it on YouTube, and I believe it's Philadelphia Christian Church, and then the letter N, Philadelphia. So you can come there, and whenever we come on, you'll be notified. Like to get as many viewers as we can and spreading the word. But sometimes you have to remember you can't be God-given. So sometimes when things are down and out, you do more for the Lord. But in this instance, I'm thankful in the Lord. So this is my way of rejoicing, and I need to catch up with getting through the book of Genesis. So I'm thankful for the opportunity that the Lord allowed me to travel to here. At the same time, I'm asking for prayer for Sister Parker. She's sickly. It's easy to say that sickly all the time, but I won't want to be sickly, and she's sickly. And I pray that the Lord will give her comfort, and His mercy is sufficient, and grace and mercy is sufficient for her in her life, because He can change things, whereas that she's up and about and doing what He will have her do. So let's keep her in prayer and her children. Let's keep Endtime Church in prayer and a community of Philadelphia. It's always a trying time, but it's always a joyful time, because whenever we go in with the Lord, there's always a spiritual battle. But I ask the Lord to give me peace in those battles, and to be honest about it, I have fun. I enjoy myself. I enjoy my life all the time. I may have had a job or 2 jobs in the last 8 years that was trying for me, but I enjoyed that because this is where I'm at now, and I enjoy it. I mean, I work my job. I didn't get off till like 6 some day. I just got home about 7, and I go in early, and I don't mind. I enjoy it. I mean, there are days we work 4-day weeks. Some days work 5-day weeks, but it's a good group of people, and I get to do the Lord's work in His time. But enough for me. I'll pray that everybody's reading the Bible, and hopefully before the end of the week, we're back on here again doing a weekly Bible study with my daughter. People can't believe that I'm 26 years old. No, I'm 54. But the sun haven't gotten to me here yet. I make sure I put my hat on. I need to do my jumping jacks and stay in shape. So Genesis chapter 40, and it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offered their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers. You know what? I read this and it didn't record last time. That was the deal. And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain. I guess I need to sit down. I'm going to start over again. I'm just trying to find out where I need to be and understand. And it's easier said than done. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, and against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season inward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which was bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And he said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and his blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto them, This is the interpretation of it. It's better. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner, whom thou wast his butler. But think of me when it shall be wellness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I been nothing, that they should put me into the dungeon. Now let's keep this in mind. Before there were the Jews, there were the Hebrews. And the Hebrews consist of a number of different people. All right, so you had the Jews, and you had the Canaanites. All of them were in that region. The Jews have yet to even come into existence. Now, Israel was Jacob, which is the father of Joseph, which is speaking now. And Israel had believed that his son was dead. So when Jacob, the father, had wrestled with God, and God said, Let me go. He said, I won't let you go until you give me a blessing. His blessing was Israel. So he is called Israel. So when you see Israel and Jacob in the same paragraph, you're talking about the man and the nation. And then when you see his children, when they speak about their children, the 12 tribes of Israel comes from 12 of his boys, whereas that Israel actually had over 20 kids. But they're talking about those specific 12. And then they're talking about the individual, and they're talking about the nation. So when you're reading it, you have to keep that in mind, especially in chapter 49 of Genesis, which we'll get to at some point. So verse 16 of Genesis 16 says, verse 16 of Genesis 40 says, When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uttermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat their flesh from off thee. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. You think it was by choice he remembered or forgot him? That we don't know. Maybe he was just glad to be there and just keep his mouth shut. Didn't want to cause any trouble. That we won't know. for sure until we get the glory, and then we can get that answer. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And lean-fleshed kine did eat up the flesh, eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. And he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up against them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Genesis chapter 41, verses 8. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream in one night. I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dreams he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored into my office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and shaved himself, and changed his remnant, and came in to Pharaoh. So to let you know what this man looked like. A young man, but he had to shave. There was no trimming going on, but he had to shave. And before you come before the king, you had to be ready. So before we come before God, and God, Jesus Christ said, it's about the inward man, not the outward man. So this changes it a little bit. We need to be ready inside. We need to be humble. We don't need to rush in and rush out, say our prayers, boom, 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 go about our business. We need to show respect for what Christ has done for us. That comes to mind. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. And behold, there came up out of the 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and lean-fleshed, such as I have never saw in all the land of Egypt, for badness. And the kine and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored. And as the beginning, so I awoke. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the 7 wind sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I behold this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. And this is what amazes me when God tells us what he's about to do in our life. He said, if you seek me early, he'll be there for us. But if we don't, we have consequences. He has conditional love for us. If we feed on his word daily, we'll be spiritually strong. And he'll protect us. If we don't do those things, guess what? We're not going to get it. And we have to separate ourselves from the things of the world. We can't live with God and live with the things of the world and expect to be fully blessed by the Lord. You see, but that's what the Bible is. It's a blueprint for success and to walk in God's pleasure. And the hardest thing is, it's not hard because God gives us the peace. He gives us what we want. He puts us into our promised land. He puts us into our Garden of Eden. But it's up to us to be so satisfied with what we have, and we want our cake and we're happy with this. And guess what? We want our lust too. We want to reach over there and grab the lustful stuff that's there and have that and say, oh, it's all right because God is not immediately judging us. And then when that judgment comes down, boom. We don't know what hit us. We don't know why we're walking sideways because we just got clocked by George Foreman. At the end of the day, it comes down to our obedience to the Lord. So, but God is allowing Pharaoh, who isn't God's chosen, to be what? Blessed by God's man. And we'll realize that God comes to Pharaoh's rescue, not just here, but they're going to establish in the next few chapters, or if we get to it today, you can read it. Taxation. They're going to establish a 401k nonprofit for the priests. It's not for God's priests because he hasn't been established as a kingdom yet. It's for an ungodly priest. But he's using a godly man to make an ungodly nation flourish. That's a takeaway. And all this is a dominoes effect. When Joseph was young, he had dreamed a couple dreams, and he said, my brothers are going to bow to me. And no one believed him. And they hated him for that, amongst a few other things. And they sold him to slavery. And Joseph was in a dungeon. So God can take you from anywhere to somewhere. He can take you from nowhere to anywhere he wants to take you. We just got to believe and surrender. You see, just because we're down in the dumps emotionally, a wife left us, we're down in the dumps because we feel so dirty, the type of businessmen we are, with the type of job we have, we do ungodly things to make a lot of money, because more than enough, if you make a lot of money in this country, you're stepping on somebody. If you sit back and you think about your 401ks and how they actually work and who's losing jobs so you can make a few extra bucks, but God he can restore that. That's why I'm thankful, because I really believe that in trusting God, he's put me in a position for success. And my success is here. Technology today is there. Ability to go out and talk about God in a country that really, there's no persecution to God. So we need to utilize what he has for us. But getting back to our conversation here, when we finish reading, we have a country that's doing what? And famine is coming. But God's using a godly man to teach an ungodly situation. So Christians, God tells us to go out into the world. Jesus Christ does that on the Great Commission. Now, Joseph went unawarely, but guess what? He utilized what was around him. He spoke of Christ. He didn't sit there and cry about his situation and mourn about his situation. He utilized the situation to give God the glory. That could be his trial. That can be his tribulation. Your character is judged when you're going through a rough time. Who you going to give glory to? He could have sat there and fussed and moaned and complained. And I talked to Sister Parker today, and she has arthritis through her body. She can barely type. She has diabetic. And she said, I refuse to complain to God about this. I'm going to thank God for what I do have. She didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what I got from it. And that's what we should do. And God will use that. And here we're seeing the benefits of, if you're seeing what he's reaping, what he sowed. He sowed faith. He sowed integrity in God and Christ, and his righteousness in God is what's enabling him to be used of God. Don't always have to be good to be good. When it's bad, I don't want to talk to nobody. People try to tell me I have OCD because I get focused on getting things done. People that's unfocused, you want to call me OCD, that's fine. But you stay focused because the devil is out to try to distract you. Stay focused on the basic things we need to do. I get up in the morning and read my Bible. Very few days, over the last, I don't know how many years, I haven't got up and read my Bible. I think it's one time. But if I get up, as soon as I remember, I'm right on it. And that's very, very seldom because things happen in the morning. But very seldom I get up, that's the first thing I do. And I get up early enough by the grace of God. If I don't, Lord, help me out. Give me strength. Give me strength to get up so I can do what I need to do in you. So we're at Genesis 41:24. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this to the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years. I'm an idiot. The dream is one. And the 7 thin, ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh, which God is about to do. He showed unto Pharaoh. Behold, there came 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will surely bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the 5th of Egypt in the 7th plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the land, under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the house, for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck, and he made him to ride in the 2nd chariot. And they cried before him, bow thy knee. and he made him rule over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Sabnath-paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, and the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which was in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. And to Pharaoh was born 2 sons. Before the years of famine came, was Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God said, He has made me forget all my toil in my father's house. And the name of the second called him Ephraim. But God had caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come. According as Joseph hath said, and the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he said to you do. And famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses, and said unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands.